Breaking tonight, the global order just shifted fundamentally. Canada didn't back down, they doubled down. And Australia just became the rallying point for an entirely new coalition. Tensions are escalating across the Pacific tonight. Donald Trump launched aggressive tariff threats and dismissed allied contributions, but instead of diplomatic submission, Canberra and Ottawa accelerated strategic coordination. March 2026. The month middle powers stopped asking for permission. Everyone believed America's smaller allies would capitulate to Trump's pressure. Financial analysts expected Canada to accept economic coercion quietly. Political commentators assumed Australia would avoid confrontation with Washington. Defense experts predicted allied nations would absorb Trump's insults about their war sacrifices without response. They were all utterly, completely incorrect. The speech that changed everything. Davos, Switzerland, January 2026. Standing before the World Economic Forum, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney delivered a speech that didn't just challenge American unilateralism, it obliterated it. He denounced the use of tariffs as coercion. He rejected unilateralist policies categorically. He called for greater cooperation between the world's middle powers. And here's what's extraordinary, viewers. Carney never mentioned Donald Trump's name, not once. He didn't need to. Every single person in that room knew exactly what he was talking about. And the applause, thunderous, because Carney didn't just speak for Canada. He spoke for every nation watching America's new administration with growing alarm. The Australia Institute captured it perfectly in their January 27th podcast. If the Trump administration killed what remained of the post-war international order, Carney's speech was its eulogy. Not a complaint, not a protest, a eulogy. The formal declaration that an era has ended and middle powers are writing the next chapter themselves. Translation: Ottawa just told Washington that Canadian sovereignty is non-negotiable. That economic coercion won't work. That allies are partners, not vassals. And what happened next reveals exactly why Australia's response matters more than anyone realizes. Canberra's move Sunday, January 25th, 2026. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese appears on ABC's Insiders program, and he makes an announcement that should send shockwaves through every foreign ministry on earth. My friend Mark Carney will visit Australia and give an address to the Parliament in March. Did you catch that, viewers? Not a bilateral meeting, not a trade discussion. An address to Parliament. That's the level of honor reserved for the most significant international visits. That's the statement you make when you're not just agreeing with someone, you're standing with them. Albanese continues, we are very much engaged with our partners overseas, and we do have a shift in the way that international politics is being played, with a greater engagement from middle powers. Let me translate that diplomatic language for you. We see what's happening in Washington. We're building alternative structures, and we're doing it with countries who share our values, our commitment to multilateralism, our belief that international cooperation isn't weakness, it's strength. This isn't diplomatic theater. This is Australia publicly aligning itself with Canada's vision for a post-American leadership world order. And they're doing it in March, when the whole world will be watching. What Trump got wrong about allies, but here's where this story becomes personal for every Australian watching tonight. Because Trump didn't just threaten tariffs. He didn't just demand submission. He insulted the sacrifice of Australian soldiers. In a recent interview, Trump made an astonishing claim. He said NATO had never come to America's aid. He downplayed Allied contributions in Afghanistan, suggesting they mainly served in support roles. He dismissed 2 decades of Allied sacrifice as irrelevant. Let me give you some facts, viewers. Facts that apparently escaped the president's attention. 47 Australian soldiers died in Afghanistan. 47 families received that knock on the door. 47 sets of parents, spouses, children who will never be whole again. 40,000 Australians served in that conflict, on the front lines, in combat, defending not just Australian interests, but the collective security of democratic nations. Nearly 1,000 Allied soldiers total gave their lives in Afghanistan. These weren't support roles. These were brothers and sisters in arms who answered America's call after 9/11, when the United States invoked NATO Article 5 for the first and only time in history. And Trump's response, to pretend it never happened. Albanese's reaction was careful but devastating. He wouldn't give a running commentary on all of President Trump's comments. But what Trump said was entirely not appropriate and completely unacceptable. Those 47 Australian families, they deserve respect. They deserve admiration. They deserve a prime minister who won't let their sacrifice be erased by historical revisionism. Translation: You can insult Australia's government. You can threaten our economy, but you cannot dishonor our fallen, and you cannot rewrite history. That line is absolute. The Board of Peace debacle, and then came Trump's so-called Board of Peace, his grand plan to rebuild Gaza, the invitation to create the most prestigious board of leaders ever assembled at any time. Bold claim. Let's examine the reality. Trump invited Canada. Mark Carney's response was measured and professional, and Trump's reaction, he withdrew the invitation on Truth Social like a rejected teenager. Dear Prime Minister Carney, Trump wrote, please let this letter serve to represent that the Board of Peace is withdrawing its invitation to you. Stunning diplomacy, viewers. Absolutely stunning. Because here's what Trump revealed with that petty gesture. He doesn't want partners. He wants subordinates. He doesn't want allies who might disagree. He wants an audience that applauds on command. And the result? Not one Western liberal democracy has joined this most prestigious board except the United States itself. Not one. Australia received an invitation too, and Albanese's response was masterfully noncommittal. It's unclear what the objectives of this are, which is why we will give it further consideration. Translation, we're not saying no. We're saying prove this is worth our time. Show us this isn't just theater. Demonstrate this serves genuine peace rather than political optics. That's the response of a middle power that knows its value. Why March 2026 changes everything, dear viewers. Between January and March 2026, something extraordinary is happening in global power relationships. Washington pushed too hard. Canberra said no. And Canada, principled multilateralist Canada, became the partner every middle power started calling first. This isn't just about one parliamentary address. This is about the fundamental collapse of coercive diplomacy as a strategy and the rise of cooperative middle powers as the new architects of international order. Think about the signal Carney's March visit sends. When he stands in Australia's parliament, he won't just be speaking to Australian MPs. He'll be speaking to Japan, South Korea, India, the EU, Latin American democracies, African nations. Every country watching American unilateralism with alarm will see two middle powers demonstrating there's an alternative. The pattern is becoming identical across every conversation. Diplomatic officials reference Trump's approach with traditional allies, express concern about reliability, and ask if there are alternative frameworks. The answer from Canberra and Ottawa is always the same yes, and we'll build them together, respecting sovereignty while doing it. Albanese laid out Australia's unique position perfectly. Commonwealth member, APEC participant, ASEAN partner, Pacific Islands Forum leader. Australia sits at the intersection of every major regional architecture. That's not geographic luck. That's strategic positioning decades in the making. All of this means that when you look at the global architecture, Albanese explained, the role that we can play in our region and around the world is of a stabilizing force at a time where, quite frankly, there is a lot of turbulence and turmoil in the world. Stabilizing force, not subordinate, not follower. Stabilizer, leader, architect. The new reality here is what's actually happening, viewers. And I need you to understand this because the mainstream media isn't telling you. The post-war order wasn't killed by China. It wasn't killed by Russia. It was killed by the United States abandoning its own creation. Trump's tariffs, his dismissal of alliances, his transactional approach to relationships built on shared sacrifice, these aren't preserving American leadership. They're ending it. And into that vacuum, middle powers aren't waiting for permission. They're building something new. Canada provides the intellectual framework through Carney's vision of multilateral cooperation. Australia provides the geographic and institutional connectivity. Together, they're offering the world something Trump cannot: reliable partnership without domination, cooperation without coercion, strength through unity rather than unilateral dictation. When Carney addresses Australia's parliament in March, watch what happens next. Watch which countries send observers. Watch which foreign ministers suddenly find reasons to visit Canberra. Watch which nations start coordinating their responses to American pressure. This is how new orders begin, not with declarations of independence from American leadership, with quiet coordination, with symbolic gestures that signal deeper alignment, with middle powers discovering they don't need Washington's permission to solve global problems. What this means for you, if you're Australian, understand this: your country just became the geographic and institutional heart of the middle power moment. The decisions made in Canberra over the next 12 months will shape the next decade of global politics. If you're Canadian, recognize that Carney's courage in Davos and his partnership with Australia represents the most significant assertion of Canadian autonomy in a generation. If you're American, pay attention, because your allies aren't abandoning you. They're building insurance policies against an unreliable partner. And if Washington wants to rebuild trust, it starts with recognizing that partnership is mutual, sacrifice deserves recognition, and allies are not assets to be managed but partners to be respected. The March turning point, March 2026, won't just be another diplomatic visit. It will be the moment two middle powers stood before the world and said, we choose cooperation over coercion. We choose multilateralism over unilateralism. We choose respect over dominance. And every nation watching will have to choose which model they want to follow. The Australia-Canada alignment isn't anti-American. It's post-American. It's recognition that global leadership has changed, and middle powers will write the next chapter themselves. Trump thought tariff threats and dismissive rhetoric would bring allies to heel. He thought economic pressure and historical revisionism would force submission. He was entirely, utterly incorrect, because he forgot something fundamental. Allies built on shared values and mutual sacrifice don't break under pressure. They unite. Share this video. Subscribe for updates on the March address. Because what happens when Mark Carney stands in Australia's parliament will reveal the future of global power. And viewers, that future is being written in Canberra and Ottawa, not Washington. The era of middle powers has begun. Australia just became its capital.